Hello, my name is Les Litwin. I'm the Technical Sales Director of Antrica. Today I wanted to go over a quick start guide for the ANT-1776ZB, which is our Zoom Block encoder module designed specifically for the Sony FCB range of Zoom Blocks. It will also interface to a number of other cameras which I'll talk about during the video. So without further ado, let me show you the hardware setup in the bottom right hand corner. So here you can see the Sony Zoom Block is connected via an LVDS cable to the 1776ZB. On the other side here there's a USB camera, which is this camera here, and so at the moment we only have two cameras connected, and then the cables at the end are the Ethernet and power cables respectively. So that's the hardware setup. The 1776ZB is basically a 3-camera video encoder into H.264 and H.265 with a variety of streaming formats such as RTSP, MPEG-TS, RTP. The USB camera acts as our third interface, and then we have two MIPI interfaces that are broken out as LVDS or dual LVDS or LVDS plus one other type of interface. So we have a really flexible camera interface structure on this board. The board is the same physical size as the back of a Sony Zoom Block, so it can be mounted onto the back of the Zoom Block camera. This particular board has no heatsink fitted or no cooling. There is a small fan in the very bottom right hand corner which you can't see, that's just keeping the temperature down. So anyway, without further ado, let's move on to the web interface. So the IP address of this camera is 192.168.0.30, which you can see at the top right hand corner here. And this is the default IP address of the board when it ships from the factory. So when you log in using Google Chrome, you'll be presented with this web interface with 4 potential pages at the top. The About page is purely about the hardware of the board. The Info page is probably the most useful page. So here we can see what the board is, so it talks a little bit about the hardware. We then can also see the software, and the most important part here is the LDVC number, which is the firmware revision that this board is running. So in this case 1070. The network is basically the IP address of the board, and then the camera really tells you the status of the 3 interfaces that we have for this board. Now at the moment I only have 2 interfaces connected. That is, the top one is the Sony Zoom Block, the bottom one is the USB camera via USB-C, and the third interface is unused in this case, but it could equally be connected to a Flir Lepton or Flir Boson or other night vision camera. And then the storage is just telling us what recording storage we have and what's been used, and finally at the bottom the temperature of the board. So as you can see, it's nicely at 45-46 degrees, which is fine for this board. Once it gets above 60-70, then obviously that's reaching the top end of the temperature range of the product. Okay, so let's have a look at settings. So in the settings, you will basically be deciding what you want to do in terms of connecting cameras and USB cameras or Sony Zoom Blocks. So the 2 CSI interfaces are basically the 2 MIPI interfaces that we have. So if you think of this as MIPI 0 and MIPI 1, MIPI 0 is connected via a MIPI to LVDS conversion, and so the Sony is connected directly to the LVDS, and then in turn that's connected to the chip via the MIPI interface. The second CSI, or the second MIPI interface, can be configured to connect to a number of other interfaces, such as camera link, such as LVDS, so you could have a dual LVDS interface on here. And then finally we've got the USB, and the USB at the moment is showing as 1280-720 at f30, and it will show you all the available USB camera resolutions that you can set. And the CSI 0, which has been assigned to the Sony Zoom Block, is only showing 1, and I'll explain that in a moment. If we go into the Sony Zoom Block settings, we have a couple of additional settings here. We can have the zoom, and the digital zoom can be controlled via this board. So effectively you can see there's a little bit of zoom already, analog zoom, been used. And you can also choose the output interface from the camera, so you can actually control what the camera is outputting as a resolution. In this case we've got 1080p30. The other interfaces here are fairly self-explanatory. I'm not going to go in any great detail, but the command control is a UART interface. The network is purely talking about the network interface to the board. Time and date, obviously we can set all that. We have RTMP and RTSP server port settings, which we can set and decide whether we want to authenticate or not. Display drivers we don't need to worry about here, and record auto delete is if the memory gets full, you can start to delete some of the older recordings. And then finally you have an OnViv and application setting, which again I'm not going to go into in this video. So that's the basic settings page. So when you first set this board up, you have to set this part first, because obviously you have to tell the board which interface is being used for which type of camera. And then when you switch to the info page, hopefully you're going to see this CSI 0, CSI 1 and USB showing a lock condition. So you can see CSI 0 is locked, USB 0 is locked. As I say, CSI 1 not used in this example. And then finally we go to the home page. This is where we can change all the stream settings of the board. So this is where we decide whether we're using RTSP, RTMP, and so on and so forth. Now it looks like a very simple interface. So you can see MUX1, which is stream 1, think of it that way. That's been set to unicast MPEG-TS, and that's the IP address it's pointing at, which happens to be the IP address of this computer, and that's the port that it's working on. You can change these settings by clicking on the little cog wheel, and here you can change what streaming format you want, change the IP, change the port, decide whether you want audio or not, but most importantly choose which camera you're connecting for that particular stream. So in this case I've got the Sony Zoom Block being connected and we're streaming in MPEG-TS. These buttons at the top are, you can set these so that the board automatically starts to stream when it reboots. Otherwise you have to manually start and stop the stream using this little button here, which is green at the moment, which means it's streaming. If I save that and then close that, then if I open up MUX2, I'm going to change to the USB camera this time, and I'll set that as TS, and let's change that to 22 and 1, 2, 3, 6. So this is the IP address of the computer, this is the port, and so on and so forth, and we'll save that. Now you think there'll be some more settings. Well, there are, and they are found by clicking on this little box down here in the bottom right hand corner with an arrow. If you click on that, you will find a whole range of additional functions and features that you can change. For example, you can change whether it's what the frame rate is of the streaming, you can change what the encoding format is, and so on and so forth. So a lot of other features here which are buried by, but you have to click on this little box to open that up. So each one of these will have this little box. So we've set up two muxes or two streams, There are up to 8 muxes, only 4 are shown here, but if you look at the top you can see that additional muxes can be set in this box here. So if you type in number 5, you'll be able to set mux 5 up. So that's pretty much it. We're already streaming two streams, one for the Sony Zoom Block, which is the top one, if you remember that was there, and we're streaming one for the webcam or the USB cam, which is there. So the next thing I'm going to do is open up an application called Maris Player. Now this is actually a low latency version of VLC Player, and this is provided to you free of charge, and what you can do with this is open up a network stream. So open up network stream, and here you choose transport, and we're going to choose unicast, and the port is 1235, so that's going to be mux1, because you can see it's 1235. So the only way you can differentiate in MPEG-TS unicast is with the port. So if we click play, so that is the Sony Zoom Block now pointed at this little train set. As you can see in the bottom right corner, it's in the distance. So if we go back to settings, let me just move that over so you can see it. And if I go to Sony settings, I can actually change the zoom via the board. So we have control of the zoom function via the board, and this can be controlled obviously through the API or through other UART, for example. Okay, so this time I'm going to change the camera source from the Sony Zoom Block to the USB camera. I've just changed it to 1920 by 1080 just so that you can see a slightly higher resolution stream. We could save that, and if we open up Neptune Player or Maris Player, there it is, and that's me with my fingers in front of the USB camera as opposed to the Zoom Block, so you can see that moving on the bottom right hand corner. So that's really the only difference, setting up either one camera or the other. So we've got a USB camera in the bottom right hand picture, you can see USB there, and the Sony Zoom Block, both connected to the same board, and we could stream both together. So we could open up another instance of let's just change this mux to the Sony Zoom Block. So that's Sony Zoom Block. We'll change the port to 1235 this time, save that, open up another instance of Maris Player, media, network stream. This time we'll stream to 1235, so we'll play, and we need to start that stream here. So you can see both streams are now working, and there's the other stream. It's just hidden behind the web page, so let me minimize that web page a bit down there, and let me scrunch that up a bit. So here you can see this is the Sony Zoom Block, and this is the webcam working together. So I hope you enjoyed that. That's the 1776ZB working with both a USB camera and a Sony Zoom Block. And as I say, other cameras can be connected, so you can have up to 3 cameras simultaneously connected and streaming at the same time.